Hola a todo el mundo y bienvenido a mi canal. Yo me llamo Sirey. Soy una abogada afro-latina licenciada y practicando las leyes criminales, pero como todos ustedes, a mí me fascina cuando estamos hablando de casos de crímenes reales. En este video vamos a hablar del caso de Ethan Couch. Si quieren más video en español, nada más dime allá abajo. Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Desiree. I'm a licensed and practicing Afro-Latina criminal attorney who, much like the rest of you, has a severe fascination with true crime cases. Listen, before we get started in this video, I just want to apologize to you guys. If you guys have been following me and watching me long enough, you know that I try to post at least one video weekly. Last week, I just completely left you out to dry, but I think that's for good reason. I have been listening and internalizing your comments about how terrible my audio was. So I took last week to revamp some things, get a new audio system, figure out my microphone setup, and get back to you guys. Second, this case happened a number of years ago now, but I am still just absolutely fascinated about what occurred here. This is a case about how wealth, privilege, money, and riches can essentially buy you out of trouble. But without further ado, let's get into it. This is the case of Ethan Anthony Couch. Ethan Anthony Couch was born on April 11th of 1997 in Tarrant County, Texas. Before Ethan was born, and in 1986, Ethan's father, Fred Couch, founded a metal company called Claiborne Metal Works. Ethan's mother, Tanya Couch, really wasn't a slouch herself. She made a good salary as a nurse until her nursing license got revoked in 2012. When Ethan was a teenager, he attended Anderson's Private School for the Gifted, Talented, and Creative, which was a private school located in Fort Worth, Texas. There's kind of a funny story about that. So when Ethan was 13 years old, he began driving himself to school. And one day, a school staff member caught him and questioned why on earth he was driving himself to school at such a young age when he couldn't legally get a permit, a license, or anything of the sort. And Ethan promptly told this staff member, "Yo, look, I could buy this school." Ultimately, Ethan withdrew from Anderson and attended a co-op school until he was 15 years old, at which point he enrolled in community college. 15 was a kind of remarkable year for Ethan because that's actually when his legal troubles began. When he was 15 years old, he was caught inside of a pickup truck with a 14-year-old girl who was unconscious and naked. And they were consuming alcohol, so Ethan was cited for minor in possession of alcohol. To this charge, Ethan ultimately pled no contest, and he was sentenced to probation. As part of his probation, Ethan was required to take an alcohol awareness class, as well as complete 12 hours of community service. So let's go back to Ethan's parents, Fred and Tanya, for just a moment. Although they were married for much of Ethan's childhood, and they didn't divorce until 2017, when Ethan was about 19 or 20 years old, everyone that knew them said that marriage was quite tumultuous, and neither of them were strangers to the legal system themselves. In the year 2000, Fred was actually charged with evading arrest, theft by check, and assault on his then wife and Ethan's mother, Tanya. It's my understanding that as a result of these charges, Fred sustained a misdemeanor conviction, although I'm unaware by which method that conviction entered. And when I say that, I mean, I don't know if he took the case to jury trial, I don't know if he did a bench trial, I don't know if he pled guilty, I don't know if he pled no contest. But regardless, he did sustain a misdemeanor conviction. On August 19th of 2014, a disturbance call went out in Fred's general area, and then he ultimately ended up getting arrested for impersonating a police officer. As a result of this, and 2 years later in December of 2016, Fred took his case to jury trial and he was ultimately convicted and received a 1-year probationary sentence. Although no charges resulted from this next thing I'm about to point out to you guys, in February of 2016, police were called out to Fred's home because he was allegedly choking his girlfriend. Listen, now I'm not one to gossip, but let's sip tea for just a moment. What did I just tell you? That Fred and Tanya Couch didn't ultimately divorce until 2017. but then police get called out the year prior because he allegedly choked his girlfriend. Now, I don't know if they were legally separated or anything, but that's just something I wanted to point out to you in case, you know. And then again, in September of 2019, Fred was charged for choking his girlfriend. I have no idea if this is the same girlfriend, and I couldn't find the resolution of the case, but I wanted to point it out to you guys nonetheless. Now let's turn to Tanya's legal issues for just a moment, because in 2013, Tanya was charged with reckless driving for trying to force another motorist off the road. And much like one of Fred's other charges, I don't know exactly how she was convicted here, but nonetheless, she was sentenced to 6 months of community supervision as well as a $500 fine. Now that we have all of that preliminary information about Fred and Tanya Couch out of the way, let's talk about what Ethan Couch was ultimately convicted of doing. On June 15th of 2013, a then 16-year-old Ethan Couch was caught on Walmart surveillance cameras stealing 2 cases of beer. At the time, Ethan was driving Fred's 2012 red Ford F-350 pickup truck, and he also had 7 passengers inside. What's really crazy is despite the fact that he was drinking, Ethan thought it would be a good idea to be driving 70 miles per hour in a 40-mile-per-hour no sé cómo se dice esa palabra, okay? Road. Another motorist by the name of Brianna Mitchell was stalled on the side of the road in her SUV. 3 very helpful civilians by the name of Holly Boyles, her daughter Shelby Boyles, and a youth minister named Brian Jennings were there and tried to render assistance to Brianna. But because Ethan was driving like such an utter and complete maniac, Ethan ended up hitting Brianna's stalled car, hitting Brian Jennings's parked vehicle, and as a result of the parked vehicle being hit, that vehicle then hit an oncoming Volkswagen Beetle. After the collisions, Ethan's father's truck ultimately flipped over and struck a tree. When paramedics ultimately did arrive to the scene, Brianna, Holly, Shelby, and Brian were all pronounced dead. Miraculously, Ethan and all 7 of his passengers survived, despite the fact that none of them were wearing seatbelts. Miraculously, the 2 people that were in the Volkswagen Beetle survived, as well as Brian's 2 kids that remained inside his vehicle. What's also unfortunate is that 9 of those remaining 7 of Ethan's passengers, 2 in the Volkswagen Beetle, and 2 in Brian's vehicle. So 11 were injured as a result of Ethan's actions. Following this incident, Ethan and some of his passengers were transported to the hospital for medical treatment. While at the hospital, and 3 hours after this incident, 16-year-old Ethan Couch's BAC was determined to be a 0.24%. I use the acronym BAC, but just to explain it for those of you guys who are unfamiliar, that just stands for blood alcohol content. And further, a 0.24 is 3 times the legal limit for someone who's actually of age. What should also be noted is that Ethan tested positive for both weed and diazepam. As a result of his actions, Ethan was charged with 6 total charges. 4 charges of intoxication manslaughter and 2 charges of intoxication assault. Texas Penal Code Section 4908 states that a person commits the offense of intoxication manslaughter if the person, 1, operates a motor vehicle in a public place, operates an aircraft, a watercraft, or an amusement ride, or assembles a mobile amusement ride, and 2, is intoxicated, and by reason of that intoxication, causes the death of another by accident or mistake. B further states, except as provided by Section 4909, an offense under this section is a felony of the 2nd degree. Texas Penal Code Section 4907 states a person commits the offense of intoxication assault if the person, by accident or mistake, 1, while operating an aircraft, watercraft, or amusement ride while intoxicated, or while operating a motor vehicle in a public place while intoxicated, by reason of that intoxication, causes serious bodily injury to another, or 2. As a result of assembling a mobile amusement ride while intoxicated, causes serious bodily injury to another. B. Further states, in this section, serious bodily injury means injury that creates a substantial risk of death, or that causes serious permanent disfigurement, or protracted loss or impairment of the function of any bodily member or organ. C. Further states, except as otherwise provided by Section 4909, an offense under this section is a felony of the third degree. So we just learned that intoxication manslaughter is considered a second-degree felony, while intoxication assault is considered a third-degree felony. Let's go through Texas penal codes to see the applicable punishments for each type of felony. Texas Penal Code Section 1233 provides the penalties for second-degree felonies. A. An individual adjudged guilty of a felony of the second degree shall be punished by imprisonment in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for any term of not more than 20 years or less than 2 years. B. In addition to imprisonment, an individual adjudged guilty of a felony of the second degree may be punished by a fine not to exceed $10,000. Texas Penal Code Section 1234 provides the penalties for third-degree felonies. A. An individual adjudged guilty of a felony of the third degree shall be punished by imprisonment in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for any term of not more than 10 years or less than 2 years. B. In addition to imprisonment, an individual adjudged guilty of a felony of the third degree may be punished by a fine not to exceed $10,000. I don't know why they make the statutes so wordy, but basically, let me simplify this for you. A second-degree felony in Texas is punishable by a range of 2 to 20 years, while a third-degree felony in Texas is punishable by a range of 2 to 10. In addition to those sentences of imprisonment, the court may impose a fine as to each felony, second or third degree, but it may not exceed $10,000. We learned in the case that I covered for Carmelo relatively recently that Texas treats people 17 years of age or older as adults. Because Ethan was only 16 years old here, he would be treated as a juvenile. Because I wanted to ensure that even back then, when all of this happened over a decade ago, the penalties were still applicable and appropriate, I did a little more research and I found out that they were. So I want you to keep everything in mind as we continue through the rest of this story. Let's just do some quick math here. And you guys know I suck at math, but what did I tell you? Second-degree felonies are punishable by a range of 2 to 20. Ethan was charged with 4 second-degree felonies, right? So 4 times 20 is 80. He was charged with 2 third-degree felonies. Those third-degree felonies are punishable by a range of 2 to 10. The maximum possible sentence for that is 10 years on each. So 10 times 2 is 20. So total, 80 plus 20 is 100 years. That should Ethan be convicted of all of these offenses, and should the court choose to impose the maximum sentence as to each and every individual charge, is what he would be facing. All of that said, Ethan pled here to avoid a trial at all. Now, what did he plead to? It's my understanding that Ethan pled to all 6 charges, so every singular last count. And you guys might be asking yourselves, well, Desiree, what's the benefit to Ethan to plead to all 6 charges? Why wouldn't he just go to trial at that point? And I think that's a phenomenal question. But it's my understanding that here, the prosecution capped his exposure at 20 years. So a cap 20 essentially just means he pleads guilty to all the 6 charges, but instead of facing a maximum possible penalty of 100 years, he's only facing a maximum of 20. After entrance of Ethan's plea, the court held a hearing where each side was to be heard about sentencing. In that hearing, Ethan presented a rather peculiar argument. Ethan's family hired a psychologist by the name of Dr. G. Dick Miller, who testified that Ethan was suffering from affluenza. And what that meant was that because Ethan was so rich and he was so wealthy, Ethan absolutely could not understand the difference between right from wrong. The prosecution argued that Ethan knew exactly what he was doing, that the court should sentence him to the maximum applicable sentence under their plea agreement, which was the 20 years. It's my understanding that this Affluenza argument was the first of its kind in Texas, and Ethan subsequently became known as Affluenza Teen. After the sentencing hearing, and in December of 2013, Judge Jean Boyd sentenced Ethan to 10 years of probation. But Judge Boyd didn't want to let Ethan off easy. So in addition to the probationary sentence, she required him to do time in a luxurious, fancy, just all right, glamorous rehab facility. Girl, what? When there is a case involving any sort of substance abuse, a standard condition of probation typically includes that the defendant is not to use that substance, whatever it is. Here, because Ethan's actions involved the usage of alcohol, the court ordered him not to use alcohol while he was on probation. If you couldn't tell by the way that I was describing his sentence, I just am astonished by this. This boy killed 4 people and injured many others despite only being charged for the injuries of 2. Ethan honestly is a menace to society. He really didn't care about his actions, and this court just reinforced to him that money could buy him out of trouble. As you can probably imagine, this sentence was met with a lot of backlash.
It sends a message that you can get away with it.
A spokeswoman for Mothers Against Drunk Driving reacting to the sentence a Fort Worth judge gave to Ethan Couch. In June, the 16-year-old drove his truck into 4 people standing by an SUV in Tarrant County. They all died. He was drunk, speeding, and had 7 friends in the truck with him.
You said there's 4 or 5 vehicles?
Yes, and there's kids laying in the street, they're laying in the ditch. I don't know how many are on the other side.
The defense argues he suffers from affluenza. A psychologist for the family described it as a condition in which he felt entitled and irresponsible because of his wealthy upbringing and a lack of discipline.
Even the people that coined the term, I'm sure, are thinking of it in terms of just a description of behavior, not a genuine mental illness. There's not some biochemical that's wrong in his body.
Dr. Albert Smith is a psychologist in Beaumont. He says affluenza is a behavior, not a mental illness or condition.
There are genuine mental illnesses, things like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, but there's also a bunch of things that were in the manual that just describe problems in behavior and problems in living. And if there were such a diagnosis as affluenza, it would certainly be one of those, not a real mental disorder.
A victim services specialist with Mothers Against Drunk Driving is angry about the judge's ruling.
What that sentence showed is that rehabilitation matters above anything else, and there is no deterrence to the community. Truly, it sent a message to the community that if you have money, if you have affluenza, you don't have to go to prison.
But Kathy Bell Shakesnyder says the ruling doesn't surprise her.
Been doing it for 22 years, and quite often when it comes to young offenders, they get probation.
A sentence in North Texas and a defense raising questions here and across the nation. In Beaumont, Lauren Hewitt, KFDM 6 News.
The judge ordered the teen to undergo therapy. The child's father will spend $500,000 a year to send the teen to rehab in California. The judge decided the teen could not get the therapy he needs in the Texas juvenile justice system.
What am I missing here?
Well, we have to ask ourselves, why are we outraged? Are we outraged because he's rich or because he used the defense of I was too rich when it comes to leniency? Because he did admit to the crime. He admitted to it. He clearly was driving while intoxicated, but we are outraged because someone is getting probation after people died. Now, the juvenile system is designed to treat, rehabilitate, and supervise juvenile offenders. So it anticipates that even for crimes like this, someone could get probation. So I guess the question I have for everybody out there who's outraged, and I understand it's a really horrific case, what is it? Is it because he's rich? Is it because that he is simply everybody who commits a homicide, DUI, juvenile or not, should go to jail for 20 years? If that's the rule, then that's what we need to move towards. But be mindful, Texas already has a very strict sentencing regime for juveniles. I'm astounded that they can end up doing 20 years in an adult facility for something like intoxication manslaughter, which is not a specific intent crime.
The unusual circumstance in Texas and some other states is that you would serve your sentence as the juvenile in a juvenile system, and upon reaching the age of 21, you get transferred over to the big guy jail, and you finish the whole thing out there. Paul, what about the notion that, I said it right off the top, where do the victims stand in all of this? I get what Danny's saying. I get rehabilitation when you're talking about young people who commit crimes, but that ignores completely Eric Boyles and the others who lost their loved ones. And what about the message to the rest of society? You can't do this.
You hit it right on the head, and I think the important thing here is we're supposed to have a society where rich and poor are treated the same under a justice system. We have a psychologist who comes into this courtroom and says he suffers from affluenza, meaning he's got so much money he doesn't know how to follow the law and act in a moral way.
No,
well, the
no,
cure.
I'm just going to change that.
That's exactly what he was saying.
That family has so much money. They have not raised him to understand right from wrong. They've thrown money at problems.
So he's a spoiled rich kid.
That's not
so
his fault,
instead of, I don't care whether it's his fault or not. It's not the fault of the black kid who's raised in a ghetto who commits an armed robbery of a bodega. Maybe that's not his fault either. But you know what? He's going to prison if he does that.
But that's a factor of sentencing.
Let me just finish my point here. The cure for affluenza is poverty inflicted by going to prison. And this kid should be in some dimly lit dungeon for about 9 months to learn that money doesn't buy you out of the criminal justice system. And this judge made a very serious error here in being so lenient, because the message that's sent to the community is, if you have money, and if you have the ability to get a good lawyer and a good psychologist in, even if you kill 3 or 4 people, you're going to get a lenient sentence.
No, I looked at the website. I looked at what his schedule is going to be every day of the week. And it's cooking classes, one-on-one nutritional counseling, mixed martial arts, gym, equine therapy. He gets to ride horses, yoga, meditation. He has gym access. He can get beach access. If he's on good behavior, he can get television access. How is that punishment in any form for killing 4 people?
I'm not interested in how much punishment he gets. I'm interested in taking away things that are important to him and replacing them with things that are in his best interest.
I mean, you work with criminal defense attorneys all the time. You testify in court. It's a big part of what you do. You're concerned about the justice system. You live in this community. Is this justice? I mean, I know that maybe the kid won't have his Xbox, but I'd love to go to a facility for a year and do meditation and yoga and learn cooking skills and have one-on-one nutritional counseling and ride horses. You know, that sounds great. To the man who has lost his wife and his daughter and sees this young man who has ruined his life, has killed his wife, has killed his daughter, has killed 2 other people as well, ruined the lives of a number of other people as well. What consequence is there really for him killing 4 people?
For 10 years, the judge will have the discretion at any time she chooses to send this kid to the penitentiary.
Also, in response to Judge Boyd's sentence, many were looking into her past sentences of similarly situated defendants. What they learned was actually quite fascinating. In February of 2004, Judge Boyd sentenced a 16-year-old boy by the name of Eric Bradlee Miller to 20 years in prison for stealing a car and drunkenly killing one person who happened to be a 19-year-old father. What's interesting is that even though Eric was 16 years old, just like Ethan, and even though Eric was intoxicated, just like Ethan, Eric's BAC was less than half of Ethan's. What's also interesting is that Eric only killed one person, not to say only as if it's not a big deal. He shouldn't have killed anyone. But it's interesting that Eric killed one person and Ethan killed 4. Judge Boyd found it appropriate to sentence Eric, but not Ethan, to the maximum possible penalty. The only difference between Eric and Ethan is Ethan's parents' wallets. During the imposition of sentence, Judge Boyd told Eric, "The court is aware you had a sad childhood. I hope you will take advantage of the services offered by the Texas Youth Commission and turn your life around." although I couldn't find the name of this defendant. Also in March of 2012, Judge Jean Boyd sentenced a 14-year-old black boy to juvenile detention for killing someone with one punch.
But this same judge sentenced a 14-year-old, not affluent African-American child, young man, who killed one person after punching that person and they fell down and hit their head. This judge sent that 14-year-old to the Texas Juvenile Justice Department for 10 years. And that kid is going to be in there till they're 19 years old. And if they violate their rehab program while they're in there, they may go to the adult justice system. So why is that okay for a 14-year-old poor kid, but for a 16-year-old well-off kid, they get to go have equine therapy? Does that seem fair?
There actually are black people who have money, Anderson. I don't know why you continue to make this a racial thing there.
Well, because I'm not saying that black people don't have money.
I treat all races.
Well, I'm saying this judge previously, just very recently, sentenced a 14-year-old who did not have money to the Texas juvenile justice system for killing one person for 10 years. So you're telling me that there are...
I trust that judge, and I don't know what the conditions were, Anderson.
Mm-hmm. You don't believe that there's a separate system, that this is a prime example that there's a separate system of justice if you have money?
I don't agree with you on that, of course. I do believe that just like you and I talked yesterday, if you have a lot of money, you get people with more skills. You get a better singer. We have you tonight. I'm sure that, you make more than the local guy here. That's just the way the world works. And there's some good things about that, some not so good things.
I don't think those facts are quite on par with Ethan's the way that Eric's are, but I just wanted to tell you guys about it nonetheless. After receiving the gift of probation, you think that a kid so blessed, gifted, creative, and talented as Ethan would literally just count his blessings and stay out of the way of the law, right? Wrong. On December 2nd of 2015, a video surfaced online, I think via Twitter, of Ethan playing beer pong at a party. What did I previously tell you guys? A condition of Ethan's probation is to stay away from alcohol. So clearly this was a violation. Someone reported Ethan's violation because, like I said, the nation was outraged by this sentence. And on December 11th of 2015, Ethan's probation officer issued a warrant for his arrest. After issuing the warrant, Ethan's probation officer tried to get into contact with he and his mother, Tanya, to absolutely no avail. So 7 days later, on December 18th of 2015, Ethan's probation officer reported he and his mother, Tanya, as missing. Well, specifically, Ethan as wanted, right? Because the arrest warrant already went out. And Ethan's mother, Tonya, as missing. Later in December, the hunt for Ethan and Tanya became a matter of federal importance. The FBI and several other federal agencies were on the look for Ethan and Tanya Couch.
He's the young man who got probation for killing 4 in a drunk driving crash 2 years ago. Tonight, the teen infamous for his Affluenza defense
Affluenza
is having a tough time following the rules again. 18-year-old Ethan Couch is missing. He didn't check in with his probation officer in Texas earlier this month. His disappearance comes weeks after video of Couch watching friends play beer pong was posted online. The 18-year-old is not allowed to drink during his 10-year probation, and the DA is investigating the video. His probation officer would have tested him for drugs and alcohol at the appointment he missed. Authorities say they also can't find his mother. Couch's parents, who are millionaires, allowed him to stay alone in their 4,000-square-foot mansion when he was just 16. That's when he drove his friends drunk and killed 4 people. He never spent a day in jail.
And then, on December 28th, 2015, 3 days after Christmas and into the holiday season, Ethan and his mother, Tanya Couch, were located in, of all places, Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. It's my understanding at that point that Ethan's mother, Tanya, returned to the United States, but Ethan ultimately ended up challenging extradition. I know we've talked about extradition before, but I don't know if we've talked about the fact that you can challenge extradition. So a defendant has few options, okay? They can waive extradition, right? And be like, listen, if I'm found in another country, I'll just come back voluntarily. Here's my waiver. Or they can challenge extradition and just make it a whole lot harder for law enforcement to do their jobs. And because Ethan was doing absolutely everything aside from taking accountability, he did exactly that. So Tanya returned to the United States first, and Ethan returned later, late January of 2015, after he decided that he didn't want to contest extradition anymore. Because Ethan was now 18 years old, his case was being transferred from the juvenile system to the adult system. So what are we hoping for here with this new judge? I mean, maybe some accountability. Hopefully the court doesn't just sentence Ethan to probation again. Ethan not only got off easy with a 10-year probationary sentence initially, he absconded. The boy fled to Mexico. Is anyone going to hold him accountable? On April 13th of 2016, District Court Judge Wayne Salvant sentenced Ethan to 720 days in jail, which is 10 days shy of 2 full years.
All right, Mr. Couch, in 1450917, when the court has received the transfer on intoxication manslaughter, as a condition of your probation, the court's going to order that you submit to 180 days in a county jail. As to 1450918, wherein the court has received the transfer from the juvenile court and it's intoxication manslaughter, the court's going to order 180 days in this case in the county jail. And this is going to be consecutive. So after the first 180 days, then the second 180 days will start. As to 1450920, having the court receiving this as a transfer from the juvenile court as a condition of your probation. In this case, the court's going to order that you spend 180 days in the county jail, and this also will be consecutive to the other 2 cases, meaning that you will serve that after you finish your first 2. And as to 1450921, the transfer to this court from the juvenile court as a condition of your probation, I'm going to order that you spend 180 days in this case. And this also will be consecutive, which means that after you spend 180 days in your other 3 cases, consecutively you will do this.
Following Ethan's release from custody, he was to remain on probation until 2024. You would think, after being given 2 slaps on the wrist, 2 little naughty boys, learn your lesson, 2 little pats on the back, essentially, after being commended for literally having the legal system in the palm of his hand, that Ethan would learn his lesson. He would wisen up, and he would completely stay out of trouble. Right? Wrong. On January 2nd of 2020, Ethan was rearrested on another probation violation, and he was booked into the Tarrant County Jail for only 1 day before he was ultimately released. According to Ethan's probation officer, Ethan's violation was for marijuana usage, and he couldn't prove that Ethan used marijuana versus just using CBD oil. Today, Ethan is almost a 30-year-old man, and by the photos that I've seen of him, I don't think he's doing too hot. This case is a clear and convincing depiction of how members of different socioeconomic statuses are treated differently in the criminal justice system. Ethan got away with murder, and the family members of all of Ethan's victims are going to have to live with the fact that Judge Jean Boyd got it wrong. I don't even know where she is today. Maybe retired or whatever, hopefully off the bench. But she just got it wrong. This case is absolutely infuriating. It's saddening. It's just ridiculous, quite frankly. Let me know what you guys think down below. Let me know if you enjoyed this video, if you like this story, and if you want to hear more like it. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Until next time, y'all take care.